Of all the people who risked their lives during the Holocaust, why don't we know her name? Not Anne Frank, not Oskar Schindler, not Raoul Wallenberg. Her name was Irena Sendler, and over the course of 18 months, she smuggled approximately 2,500 Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto, right under the noses of Nazi guards. This is the only woman who single-handedly saved more Jewish children than any other individual during World War II, and the story of how she did it, why she did it, and what happened when the Gestapo caught her is more extraordinary than you might imagine. Before we begin, if you appreciate deep dives into history's unsung heroes like this, I'd be grateful if you'd consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps more people discover these stories, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. To understand why Irena Sendler risked everything to save children she'd never met, you need to know who she was, and more importantly, you need to understand the world she grew up in. Irena Sendler was born Irena Krzyżanowska on February 15, 1910 in Warsaw, Poland. She wasn't born into wealth or privilege. Her father, Stanisław Krzyżanowski, was a country doctor who treated poor patients in the villages outside Warsaw. Many of his patients were Jewish, a fact that would shape Irena's entire worldview. When Irena was 7 years old, a typhus epidemic swept through the region. Her father treated typhus patients when other doctors refused. The disease was highly contagious and often fatal. He knew the risks. He treated them anyway. In 1917, he contracted typhus from his patients and died. Before he died, her father told young Irena something she would never forget. He said that when someone is drowning, you have to give them your hand. You don't ask if they're Jewish or Catholic, or what their politics are. You just reach out and pull them to safety. That lesson would define her life. Irena studied Polish literature at Warsaw University in the 1930s, but even as a student she was rebellious. The university had implemented ghetto benches, segregated seating where Jewish students were forced to sit separately. Irena refused to accept it. She deliberately sat in the Jewish section in protest. When the university suspended her for 3 years because of her activism, she didn't stop fighting. By 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, Irena was working as a social worker in Warsaw's welfare department. She was 29 years old, newly married, and working in a job that seemed safe and ordinary. Then everything changed. The Nazis established the Warsaw Ghetto in October 1940. They crammed approximately 400,000 Jews, about 30% of Warsaw's population, into just 2.4% of the city's area. They built walls topped with barbed wire and broken glass. They posted guards. They cut off food supplies to starvation rations. Irena watched as the ghetto became a death trap. Disease spread rapidly in the overcrowded conditions. Starvation was systematic. Rations were set at 184 calories per day, far below survival level. Bodies appeared on the streets daily. Children were dying by the hundreds, and Irena couldn't look away. By 1942, the situation in the Warsaw Ghetto had become a deliberate extermination through starvation and disease, what historians call passive genocide, but that wasn't enough for the Nazis. In July 1942, the Germans began what they called the Great Action mass deportations from the ghetto to Treblinka, extermination camp. Over the course of 2 months they deported approximately 300,000 Jews to Treblinka, where nearly all were murdered in gas chambers within hours of arrival. The ghetto residents knew what was happening. Rumors filtered back. Witnesses escaped and told the truth. Parents realized that deportation meant death, not just for them, but for their children. That's when Irena made her decision. She would save the children. But how do you smuggle children out of a heavily guarded ghetto? How do you hide them in a city under Nazi occupation? How do you find families willing to shelter Jewish children when the penalty for helping Jews was immediate execution, not just of you, but of your entire family? Irena had one advantage: her job. As a social worker with Warsaw's welfare department, she had a legitimate reason to enter the ghetto. The Nazis allowed social workers to enter to inspect sanitary conditions and control disease outbreaks. They were terrified that typhus would spread from the ghetto into the Aryan parts of Warsaw. Irena obtained a permit from the Warsaw Epidemic Control Department. She got an official armband identifying her as a sanitary inspector, and she began entering the ghetto regularly, supposedly to inspect for disease. But she wasn't there to inspect. She was there to save children. She joined Ugota, the underground Polish council to aid Jews, one of the only organizations in occupied Europe specifically dedicated to helping Jews. Working with Ugota, she began organizing a rescue network. The operation was extraordinary in its scope and danger. Irena and her team of about 25 people, mostly women, began systematically smuggling children out of the ghetto using methods that sound like they're from a spy novel, except they were terrifyingly real. The smuggling methods were ingenious and desperate. Every single one carried the risk of immediate execution if discovered. Infants and toddlers were sedated with sleeping medicine and hidden in toolboxes, carpenter bags and suitcases. Irena would walk past Nazi guards carrying a bag with a sleeping baby inside, her heart pounding, knowing that if the child woke and cried, both she and the child would be shot immediately. Older children were hidden in body bags and coffins placed alongside or beneath actual corpses being removed from the ghetto. They had to lie perfectly still next to dead bodies while passing through checkpoints. Some children escaped through the courthouse that bordered both the ghetto and the Aryan side of Warsaw. They'd enter one door as Jews inside the ghetto and exit another door on the free side, guided by sympathetic Polish court workers. Others escaped through sewers and underground passages. Small children were led through filthy dark tunnels, wading through waste, terrified and confused, not understanding why they had to leave their parents. Irena even used an ambulance. She'd drive into the ghetto claiming to be checking for typhus cases. Children would be hidden in the ambulance, some in stretchers under blankets, some in the driver's cabin. She kept a dog in the ambulance that she'd trained to bark when Nazi guards approached, covering any sounds the hidden children might make. But the hardest part wasn't the smuggling itself. It was convincing parents to give up their children. Imagine the conversation. Irena would approach desperate parents in the ghetto and tell them, "Give me your child. Let me take them away. You may never see them again. I cannot guarantee their safety. I cannot promise you'll survive to be reunited. But if you don't give them to me, they will certainly die here." What parent could make that choice? To hand your child to a stranger, knowing you might never see them again. To say goodbye, possibly forever, on the slim hope they might survive. Many parents refused. They couldn't bear to be separated from their children. They hoped somehow they'd all survive together. But others made the impossible choice. They gave their children to Irena. They chose a slim chance of survival over certain death. One mother asked Irena, "Can you guarantee my child will live?" Irena answered honestly, "No, I cannot guarantee anything. But I can guarantee that if they stay here they will die." The mother handed over her baby. Once outside the ghetto, the children needed new identities. Irena and Szegota created false papers, birth certificates, baptismal records, giving each child a Polish Catholic identity. They had to choose names that wouldn't sound Jewish. They taught the children Catholic prayers and rituals so they could pass as Christian. Then they placed the children with Polish families willing to hide them, or in convents and orphanages run by sympathetic nuns. Each placement was carefully arranged. Each family knew they risked execution for their entire household if discovered, and Irena kept records of every child. She wrote down their real Jewish names and their false Polish identities. She wrote down where each child was hidden. She kept these lists on thin tissue paper rolled into small cylinders, and she buried them in glass jars under an apple tree in a colleague's garden. Why keep records? Because she believed she had to believe that someday the war would end, and when it did, these children would need to know who they really were. They'd need to find any surviving family members. The lists were insurance against the children losing their true identities forever. By late 1943, Irena had personally coordinated the rescue of approximately 2,500 children from the Warsaw Ghetto. That's more than any other single individual saved during the Holocaust, but the Gestapo was getting closer. On October 20th, 1943, there was a knock on Irena's door at 5 a.m. The Gestapo had been tracking her. Someone, the identity remains disputed, had informed on her. When she opened her door, German officers immediately arrested her. They searched her apartment, but didn't find the lists. Those were safely buried under the apple tree. They took her to Poriak prison, the main Gestapo prison in Warsaw. Poriak had a reputation that terrified everyone in occupied Warsaw. It's where the Gestapo took people for enhanced interrogation, systematic torture to extract information. The Gestapo wanted names. They wanted to know who else was involved. They wanted the locations of the hidden children. They wanted to dismantle the entire network. Irena gave them nothing. They beat her. They broke both her legs. They broke her feet. They subjected her to torture so severe that she bore the scars and walked with a limp for the rest of her long life. But she gave them nothing. Not a single name. Not a single address. Not one location where a child was hidden. Think about what that means. She was 33 years old. She was being tortured by trained interrogators who had broken countless prisoners before her. The pain must have been unimaginable. She could have ended it at any moment by giving them just one name, one address, one piece of information. She chose to endure. The Gestapo sentenced her to death. She was scheduled to be executed by firing squad. At Poriak prison, that was a daily occurrence. Prisoners taken to the courtyard and shot, but Szygota had resources. They'd infiltrated some Polish guards and administrators. They managed to bribe a German guard. On the day Irena was supposed to be executed, the guard led her to the courtyard, then let her escape instead of shooting her. The Germans officially listed her as executed. They added her name to public death lists posted around Warsaw. But Irena was alive, hidden by the resistance, recovering from her injuries in various safe houses. She spent the rest of the war in hiding, unable to resume her rescue work because she was officially dead. Her legs never fully recovered. She needed crutches for months and walked with pain for the rest of her life. But she'd saved 2,500 children, and she'd protected them by refusing to talk. When the war ended in 1945, one of Irena's first acts was to dig up the jars buried under the apple tree. The lists were intact, the real names and hiding places of all 2,500 children she'd rescued. She began the heartbreaking work of trying to reunite children with surviving family members. But here's the tragic reality. The vast majority of the children had no one to return to. Their parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, entire families had been murdered in Treblinka, Auschwitz, or the ghetto. Some children were eventually reunited with surviving relatives, but most were orphans. Many of the children didn't even remember they were Jewish. The youngest ones had been toddlers when rescued. They'd spent years living as Catholic Poles. They knew Catholic prayers but had no memory of their Jewish heritage. Some didn't want to return to being Jewish. It was too painful, too dangerous, too confusing. Irena tried to help as many as possible, providing information from her lists to Jewish organizations attempting to rebuild shattered families. But then Poland's communist government took power, and Irena's story took another dark turn. The communist authorities didn't celebrate her wartime heroism. Instead, they interrogated her about her connections to the Polish government in exile in London. They viewed resistance members who'd worked with Western organizations as potential threats. She was interrogated multiple times, suspected of being too connected to Western interests. For decades, the communist Polish government suppressed her story. She lived in modest circumstances, working ordinary jobs, telling almost no one about what she'd done during the war. The 2,500 children she'd saved, those who survived and knew their history, remained largely silent too. It wasn't safe to draw attention to Jewish rescue operations under communist rule. Then in 1999, something remarkable happened. 4 high school girls in rural Kansas, Norman, Hutchinson, Megan and Liz, were assigned a National History Day project. They came across a brief mention in a magazine of a Polish woman named Irena Sendler, who had saved 2,500 children. They didn't believe it at first. How could someone save 2,500 people and be completely unknown? They thought it must be an exaggeration. Maybe it was 250 children, and someone added a zero by mistake. They researched further and discovered it was true. They wrote a play called Life in a Jar, about Irena's story. The play was performed in Kansas, then spread to other schools, then internationally. That play brought Irena Sendler's story to global attention for the first time, more than 50 years after the war. By then, Irena was 89 years old and living in a small Warsaw nursing home. The Kansas girls traveled to Poland to meet her. International media began covering her story. Organizations began recognizing her heroism. In 2003, Poland awarded her the Order of the White Eagle, the country's highest honor. In 2007, she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. She didn't win. Al Gore and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change won that year for their work on global warming. Many people, particularly in Poland and Israel, believed Irena deserved it more. When told about the Nobel nomination, the 97-year-old Irena responded with characteristic humility. Every child saved with my help is the justification of my existence on this earth, not a title to glory. She died on May 12, 2008, at age 98. Thousands attended her funeral in Warsaw. She was buried with full honors. This question has a clearer answer than Operation Anthropoid, but it's still complex. The immediate impact is undeniable. Approximately 2,500 Jewish children who would have been murdered in the Holocaust survived because of Irena Sendler and her network. Those 2,500 children went on to have families. Today there are an estimated 10,000 descendants of the children Irena saved living around the world. 10,000 people alive today because one woman refused to look away, but the cost to Irena personally was enormous. She endured torture that left her permanently disabled. She lived in pain for 65 years after the war. She suffered psychological trauma from the impossible choices she'd made. The children she couldn't save, the parents she'd had to convince to give up their babies. In later interviews, she said the hardest memories weren't the torture or the fear of execution. The hardest memories were of the parents begging her to take their children, and the children who were too old to forget, who cried and reached for their mothers as Irena carried them away. She said she was haunted by the children she didn't save, the ones whose parents refused to let them go, the ones she ran out of time to reach before deportations, the ones who were discovered and killed. When people called her a hero, she rejected the term. She said, "I could have done more. This regret will follow me to my death." Think about that. She saved 2,500 children at enormous personal risk and permanent physical cost, and she believed she hadn't done enough. Unlike Operation Anthropoid, Irena's actions didn't cause massive reprisals. The individual families hiding children risked execution if discovered, and some were indeed caught and killed. But there was no Lidis-style collective punishment specifically because of her rescue network. However, the broader context matters. The Warsaw Ghetto uprising in April 1943, 6 months before Irena's arrest, resulted in the complete destruction of the ghetto and the murder or deportation of the remaining 50,000 residents. Resistance in any form carried tremendous risk. The moral calculation is different from Operation Anthropoid. Irena wasn't choosing between assassinating one evil person and protecting thousands of innocents. She was choosing between doing nothing and trying to save children who would otherwise certainly die. Was it worth the risk to her own life? She clearly thought so. She never expressed regret about her choices, only about the children she couldn't save. Was it worth the risk to the Polish families who hid children? Many of those families were caught and executed, entire households killed for hiding one Jewish child. Did they consider it worth it? Based on post-war testimonies, most who survived said yes. They couldn't have lived with themselves if they'd refused. The philosophical question is different too. Operation Anthropoid asked, is it ethical to kill one evil person if thousands of innocents will die in retaliation? Irena's story asks, is it ethical to risk your life to save others when you cannot guarantee success? Most moral frameworks would say yes, attempting to save innocent lives, especially children, is clearly ethical even when the attempt is dangerous. But there's a deeper question, is there a moral obligation to help when you can? Irena believed yes. She believed her father's lesson, when someone is drowning, you give them your hand, not because you're a hero, not because you'll be rewarded, but because they're drowning and you can reach them. She was asked once why she did it. Why risk everything? Why not just keep her head down and survive? Her answer was simple. I was taught that if you see a person drowning, you must jump into the water to save them, whether you can swim or not. Irena Sendler saved 2,500 children from certain death in the Holocaust. She endured torture without betraying a single child or colleague. She lived for 65 years after the war, walking with pain from broken legs and feet, haunted by the children she couldn't save. For most of that time, her story was virtually unknown. The communist Polish government suppressed it. Western historians focused on other rescue stories. The children she saved were scattered across the world, many not knowing their true origins. It took 4 teenage girls in Kansas doing a school project to bring her story to light. That itself is remarkable. History isn't just about what happened, it's about what we choose to remember. For 50 years, the world largely forgot about Irena Sendler. Not because her actions weren't extraordinary, but because her story didn't fit convenient narratives. She wasn't a wealthy industrialist like Schindler, who could bribe officials. She wasn't a diplomat like Wallenberg with international protection. She was a working-class Polish social worker who decided that saving children mattered more than her own safety. The children she saved, those who knew their history and could tell it, called her their mother. Not because she raised them, but because she gave them life. Many of those rescued children immigrated to Israel after the war. Some became doctors, teachers, scientists. They had children and grandchildren. Today, there are estimated to be around 10,000 descendants of the children Irena saved. 10,000 people who exist because one woman decided that when children are drowning, you don't ask if they're Jewish or Catholic or what their parents' politics are. You just reach out and pull them to safety. The jars buried under the apple tree are now preserved in Warsaw's Yad Vashem Museum. The thin tissue paper lists written in Irena's careful handwriting, preserved for decades underground, represent 2,500 names. 2,500 children who might have been forgotten by history, erased by genocide, but who instead lived, had families, and passed on their stories. In the end, Irena Sendler's story isn't darker than we imagine. It's brighter. It's a story not of impossible moral calculations and devastating reprisals, but of simple, extraordinary courage. The courage to help when helping means risking everything. The courage to save children you'll never see grow up. The courage to endure torture to protect those you've saved. The courage to live with pain and regret because you believe you could have done more. When Irena died at 98, one of the children she'd saved, then an elderly woman herself, said, "She gave us life twice, once when she smuggled us out of the ghetto, and again when she kept the lists so we could know who we really were." That's the legacy. Not just 2,500 children saved, but 2,500 identities preserved. 2,500 stories that didn't end in the gas chambers of Treblinka. 10,000 descendants living today because one woman jumped into the water, whether she could swim or not.